Imagine this for a second. You've worked your entire life for a dream, put in the hours, battled through injuries, critics, and pressure, only to finally hear your name called on draft night. That moment is supposed to be the payoff, the validation, the chance to prove yourself on the biggest stage in the world. But what if I told you that for Shedeur Sanders, that moment was never what it seemed? What if I told you the team that called his name already had a plan in place to make sure he failed before he even stepped on the field? Because according to the receipts, the Cleveland Browns never truly wanted Shedeur Sanders. They wanted the Sanders brand. They wanted the headlines, the jersey sales, the ticket demand, the media circus. But the player himself? That was never the plan. In fact, less than 24 hours before the draft, Browns owner Jimmy Haslam literally admitted he didn't even want Shedeur. And then suddenly, after some mysterious behind-the-scenes conversation, Shedeur was a Cleveland Brown. Think about that. One night the team says he's not even on their radar, and the next day they're using a draft pick on him. That doesn't happen by accident. Now, we've all seen teams make questionable draft decisions before, but this is different. This isn't about whether a guy can play or not. This is about politics. This is about money. And most importantly, this is about control. Because from the moment Shedeur put on that Browns cap, insiders say the front office had already decided where he would sit on the depth chart. Buried. No real chance. No fair competition. Just a name they could cash in on before quietly shoving him aside. And if you think that sounds dramatic, you don't have to take my word for it. The owner himself practically spelled it out. He said flat out that as of Friday night, the night before the draft, Shedeur wasn't even a consideration. Then something happened overnight that changed everything. But here's the kicker. It wasn't a sudden belief in Shedeur's talent, because the very next move the Browns made proves the opposite. They drafted Dillon Gabriel, yes, the same quarterback scouts said should have been a late rounder at best in the 3rd round. And then they waited until the 5th round to take Shedeur. Now let's pause right there. If you're drafting someone because you believe in them, do you bury them behind a guy who was never even projected to go that high? Or do you do that when you already know what the script is? When you've already decided which guy is your quarterback and which guy is just here to sell jerseys? The writing was on the wall before Shedeur ever touched the practice field. Dillon Gabriel, according to insiders, had already been told he was locked into the depth chart ahead of Sanders. Let that sink in. Before the competition even began, before a single throw was made, the outcome was rigged. That's not just shady, that's a setup. And Shedeur knew it. That's why when GM Andrew Berry put his hand on Shedeur's shoulder after practice and said, "You did good," Shedeur looked him in the eye and said, "I don't believe you." Not with arrogance, not with disrespect, but with the quiet confidence of a man who's been around this game long enough to recognize when the cards are stacked against him. So here's the real question. Why draft a player you never intended to play? Why tell the world you believe in him when privately you're plotting his downfall? The answer is simple, and it's uglier than most fans want to admit. The Cleveland Browns never drafted Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback. They drafted Shedeur Sanders, the name. And that decision set off a chain of events that reveals more about the NFL's politics, power games, and hidden agendas than most people are ready to face. And trust me, what happened next will leave you questioning whether this league is about competition at all, or just about who controls the narrative. Sometimes the most revealing moments don't come from investigative reports, leaked documents, or hidden sources. They come straight from the mouths of the people in power. And that's exactly what happened with Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam. Now, for months, fans speculated something was off about the Shedeur Sanders pick. Why take a player who clearly had the talent, the pedigree, and the potential, only to give him scraps for opportunities? Why draft a quarterback and then immediately act like he's an afterthought? None of it made sense, until Jimmy Haslam opened his mouth. Because in one casual moment with reporters, Haslam let slip what the organization never wanted you to know. His words were simple but damning. He said, "If you'd have told me Friday night driving home y'all are going to pick Shedeur, I would say that's not happening." Let's stop right there. Friday night, the night before the draft. Less than 24 hours before Shedeur Sanders' name was called, the owner of the Cleveland Browns was publicly admitting the team had zero interest in him. He wasn't on their radar. He wasn't in their plans. And yet, magically, by Saturday, he's their guy? That's not a draft strategy. That's a cover-up. Think about it. The NFL draft is not some casual backyard barbecue where you change your mind at the last second. These picks are planned months in advance. Scouts submit reports, coaches weigh in, general managers map out scenarios for every round. Owners are briefed on every possibility. Nothing is left to chance. So, when Jimmy Haslam says, point blank, that on Friday night Shedeur Sanders wasn't even in the conversation, and by Saturday afternoon he was drafted, it tells you one thing. Somebody had a very different agenda. And here's where it gets even more suspicious. Haslam tried to spin it. He acted like it was all Andrew Berry's decision, saying the general manager made the call. Classic political move, praise the GM when it works out, blame him when it doesn't. But let's be real, no GM in the NFL has the power to override an owner's wishes. Not in Cleveland, not anywhere. Unless your name is John Lynch or John Elway, you're not making franchise-altering moves without ownership signing off. So if Haslam is telling us he didn't want Shedeur on Friday night, but then suddenly Shedeur is drafted on Saturday, what does that really mean? It means someone pulled strings behind the scenes. It means this wasn't about football, it was about optics. It was about the Sanders name, and Haslam knew he couldn't say no when that conversation happened because the business upside was too juicy to ignore. But here's the fatal mistake Jimmy Haslam made. He admitted it out loud. He thought he was being clever, shifting responsibility to Andrew Berry, playing the humble card. Instead, he exposed the entire scam. He confirmed what fans, insiders, and analysts had been whispering. Shedeur wasn't drafted because they believed in him. He was drafted because the brand was too big to pass up. And that one slip-up changes everything, because now we're not talking about speculation or rumors. We're talking about the owner of the team admitting on camera that Shedeur Sanders was never in their draft plans until a mysterious conversation changed it all. The question is, what was said in that conversation? Who made the call? And why did they decide overnight that Shedeur had to be a Brown? Was it pressure from the league? Was it marketing executives pointing to the financial windfall of having a Sanders jersey on shelves? Or was it simply Haslam himself realizing the circus could benefit his bottom line? We may never know the exact words exchanged in that room, but what we do know is this. Shedeur's fate in Cleveland was sealed not by talent, not by performance, not by potential, but by politics. And if you think this was just a coincidence, if you think this was just a sudden change of heart, wait until you see how the Browns handled their next draft pick. Because what they did with Dillon Gabriel proves this slip-up wasn't just a mistake, it was a confession. If Jimmy Haslam's slip-up told us anything, it's this. Drafting Shedeur Sanders was never about football, it was about business. And once you start looking at the Browns' decision through that lens, the entire picture becomes crystal clear. See, the NFL has always been more than a sport. It's a business empire built on TV ratings, sponsorships, ticket sales, and jersey revenue. And no name in this year's draft class carried more star power than Sanders. Not because Shedeur was the highest-rated quarterback, not because analysts had him pegged as the next franchise savior, but because he carries the bloodline of primetime Dion, Sanders one of the most recognizable names in all of sports. The Browns didn't just draft a player, they drafted a brand. Think about it. Overnight, their ticket sales spiked. Social media mentions went through the roof. Preseason games featuring Shedeur pulled in more eyes than usual. And the second his jersey hit the shelves, instant sellout. That's not a coincidence. That's marketing strategy at its finest. But here's the dark side. While the organization smiled for the cameras and hyped up their new rookie, insiders say the plan was already written. Shedeur wasn't going to get a fair competition for the starting job. He wasn't going to be developed into a cornerstone of the franchise. He was there to be used his name, his fame, his family legacy all leveraged to fatten Cleveland's bottom line. It's a move straight out of the NFL's playbook. Use the hype, ride the wave, and then quietly bury the player once the buzz dies down. And if you think that sounds harsh, just look at the timing. Dillon Gabriel was drafted before Shedeur, even though most scouts had him projected as a late-round pick. Why? Because the Browns needed a built-in excuse. Drafting Gabriel higher gave them cover to say, see, he's our guy, Shedeur just needs time. That way, when fans started asking why Sanders was riding the bench, But perhaps the most fascinating part of this spin cycle is how media complicity works. Outlets thrive on controversy. They need clicks, views, and debates, but they also rely on access. Reporters who push too hard risk alienating the very teams they cover, losing interviews and insider scoops. As a result, much of the media willingly plays along with the narrative management. They report what's fed to them, sprinkle in a little manufactured outrage, and move on to the next flashy storyline once the heat dies down. For fans, this creates a strange double reality. On one hand, they're bombarded with fiery debates, dramatic headlines, and the illusion of chaos. On the other, they're subtly guided toward the team's preferred narrative, that everything is under control, the slip-up meant nothing, and critics are simply looking for drama. This tension between outrage and reassurance is the very essence of media spin. It keeps fans hooked, keeps ratings high, and protects the institution at the center of the storm. In the end, the media spin and damage control didn't erase what happened. The owner's words were still said, and Dillon Gabriel's role in the narrative remained a point of intrigue. But by carefully managing the flow of information, reframing the debate, and flooding the cycle with positivity, the organization managed to blunt the impact. Instead of a full-blown scandal, the incident became just another headline in a busy sports news cycle, an easily digestible controversy that fans debated for a week before moving on to the next big story. And that's the power of media spin, not to erase mistakes, but to dilute them until they no longer matter. While the media spun the story and the front office carefully managed appearances, there was one person who saw through all the theatrics from day one: Shedeur Sanders. Unlike most rookies who enter the NFL wide-eyed and eager, Shedeur carried with him a lifetime of insight into the realities of professional sports. He wasn't just the son of a Hall of Famer, he was the son of Deion Sanders, a man who had navigated locker room politics, media scrutiny, and organizational manipulation at the highest level. And Shedeur wasn't about to be fooled. From the very first moments of organized team activities, he noticed the subtle cues, the way he was given limited reps in practice, the way personnel seemed hesitant to engage with him, and the unspoken hierarchy that placed Dillon Gabriel firmly ahead on the depth chart. These weren't mistakes, they were deliberate signals. And while many rookies might have shrugged and assumed it was simply part of the learning curve, Shedeur recognized the pattern immediately. There's a moment insiders describe vividly. Andrew Barry, the general manager, approaches Shedeur after a practice and says, "You did good." On the surface, it appears to be praise. But Shedeur's response was telling, "I don't believe you." Not in a disrespectful way, not with defiance, but with a calm, confident recognition of reality. That simple statement revealed a profound awareness. He wasn't naive, he understood the organizational game, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Shedeur's awareness extended beyond just interpersonal interactions. He understood the larger dynamics at play, the marketing motivations, the fan attention, the corporate incentives. He knew that Cleveland didn't just draft him for football reasons, they drafted him for the Sanders brand, to sell jerseys, boost ticket sales, and generate headlines. And he recognized that behind the hype, there was no guarantee of opportunity. The depth chart had been predetermined, the system was rigged, and yet he kept his composure. This level of awareness gave Shedeur a unique advantage. While others might react emotionally, complain, sulk, or publicly lash out, he chose observation, strategy, and calculated professionalism. Every interaction, every rep in practice, and every media exchange became data. He was learning not just the playbook, but the unspoken rules of how an organization operates when image and branding take priority over merit. Fans often underestimate the mental and emotional strength required to survive in situations like this. For Shedeur, it wasn't just about proving he could throw a football. It was about maintaining confidence, composure, and self-respect in an environment where those traits could be tested at every turn. He wasn't just playing football, he was navigating a complex social and political landscape within the team. Even more impressive, Shedeur maintained his professional demeanor in the face of widespread skepticism and criticism. Media narratives often questioned his readiness, his attitude, or his competitiveness, but Shedeur saw it all for what it was: noise. He understood that real support and validation wouldn't come from the press or even from every coach. True validation would come from his own preparation, execution, and consistency, regardless of the external circumstances. Ultimately, Shedeur's awareness didn't just make him resilient, it made him dangerous in a quiet, understated way. He knew where the traps were, recognized the power plays, and refused to be manipulated or distracted. While the Browns were busy orchestrating narratives and managing optics, Shedeur was silently studying, adapting, and preparing for the moment when he could assert control on his own terms. In short, Shedeur Sanders entered Cleveland with the skill set of a quarterback, but the insight of a seasoned strategist. And in a league where perception often trumps reality, that awareness would prove to be his greatest asset, allowing him to navigate the chaos around him while staying true to his own goals and identity. By the time fans and analysts started piecing together the events surrounding Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, a disturbing pattern emerged, one that suggested this wasn't just a series of poor decisions, but a coordinated strategy designed to manipulate outcomes before the first snap even happened. The more you dig into it, the clearer it becomes. The Browns' handling of Shedeur was part of a much bigger conspiracy, one that spanned the front office, coaching staff, and even extended to media narratives. Let's start with the draft itself. Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback projected by many scouts as a late-round pick or even undrafted, was taken in the 3rd round. Shedeur, widely regarded as a talented and high-potential player, wasn't even on the radar for a first-day pick by the team's own owner until the very last minute. Reports claim that Gabriel was already assured of his position on the depth chart before Shedeur even arrived in Cleveland. That isn't just poor planning, that's premeditation. The game was rigged from the start. What makes this particularly insidious is how the front office leveraged the draft to justify predetermined decisions. By selecting Gabriel ahead of Shedeur, they created a built-in excuse: higher draft pick equals more opportunity. On paper, it looked like standard operating procedure. In practice, it was a way to bury Shedeur without ever having to justify the decision openly. The narrative was controlled before it even began. Gabriel's draft position served as a shield against criticism, and the public bought it, at least initially. The conspiracy didn't stop at the draft. Insider reports revealed that practices, reps, and coaching attention were unevenly distributed in a calculated manner. Shedeur got limited reps, while Gabriel had full access to the coaching staff and playbook. Every action, from who he trained with to which drills he participated in, was part of a strategy to keep him from gaining momentum. And while fans assumed it was a rookie learning curve, the reality was far darker. Shedeur was being systematically hindered, all while maintaining the illusion of a fair competition. Even the media played its part. Analysts, commentators, and talk shows were subtly fed narratives that framed Shedeur as the problem, questioned his preparedness, and downplayed the front office's role in manipulating the situation. Insider leaks, carefully timed stories, and seemingly random commentary served to confuse fans and maintain the illusion of legitimacy. What appeared to be organic controversy was actually part of the larger orchestration, a conspiracy to protect the team's image while controlling the story. Then there's the financial incentive. The Sanders name isn't just a brand, it's a money magnet. Jerseys, ticket sales, viewership spikes, and social media engagement all soared with Shedeur in the conversation. But the front office's plan ensured that while they profited from his presence, they could limit his actual influence on the field. In other words, the organization wanted the benefit of his reputation without the responsibility of nurturing his talent. The conspiracy extends beyond individual roles. It's a system. Owners, general managers, coaches, and PR teams all have distinct parts to play. Owners set the agenda, GMs execute the strategy under subtle pressure, coaches manage perception on the field, and the media amplifies the narrative. Together, it forms a machine capable of manipulating player opportunities, fan perception, and overall public narrative, all without breaking a single written rule. Ultimately, this bigger conspiracy isn't just about Shedeur Sanders, it's a window into how modern professional sports operate. Talent alone doesn't guarantee opportunity. Names, narratives, and branding can dictate who gets the spotlight and who gets buried. And when a young player like Shedeur walks into that system, his awareness and resilience become the only tools to navigate the chaos. What's shocking is how elegantly it's executed. On the surface, it looks like normal team management. But under the hood, it's a carefully orchestrated plan where public perception is as controlled as the playbook. The Browns may have hoped no one would notice. But B2. If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.